with the launch of the LUMIX S5 II and 2X, then the G9 Mark II, the next camera coming out, hopefully from LUMIX themselves, will be another full frame camera. And in this video, I'll be giving you guys my predictions on what the next full frame camera is gonna be from LUMIX. Now, to preface, before I start going into my different predictions on what I think might be coming out and what it might include, I just want to say, even though I have some affiliation with LUMIX, I am part of their creator backstage systems. I've done a bunch of different projects with them. Everything that I'm saying in this video right now is all speculation. This is nothing that LUMIX has told me. This is just purely my guess, and also purely some of my hopes and dreams for the next LUMIX cameras as well. This is nothing that is factual whatsoever. So just before we get into it, I do need to make that disclaimer. I'm not an engineer, so again, these are just my hopes and dreams. I don't know the actual process of building a camera and what it takes. So there could be a couple things that are just incorrect information that I might say in this video because it's physically not possible at this given time. And that's just a user error. I am not an engineer. I'm just saying what I am hoping and predicting for the future. Again, none of this is factual. This is hopes and dreams of my own for what the next camera I want to see from the full frame line from LUMIX. So I'm going to be breaking this up into a couple different camera categories. And I'm going to start off with my first prediction, which is kind of my biggest hope, which would be the S1H Mark II. Or the S2H, and then I think there would be an X version as well, and I'll dive into what that would look like as well. So let's start off with some of the camera specs before I get into the entire physical build of the camera. So for camera specs, 6K open gate, either 48 or 60 frames a second. And I think this would be the biggest game changer for social media content creators who are filming B-roll for their clients and they need multiple forms of deliverables. The next other couple specs and features, this would be shooting 4K up to 120 frames a second. There'd be a multitude of different settings that will be coming in this camera where you can record internally. The next thing that I think they would include would be a 5.9K 420 10-bit up to 60 frames a second. Now they do have this up to 30 frames a second, I believe, in the S5 IIX and 2, but I think this would just go to that next level and be in that 60 frames a second. But this again would be just a 420 10-bit and not 422. And then lastly is the all internal Apple ProRes specs, which I think this would be very similar to what the GH6 is sort of doing in the G9 Mark II in terms of Apple ProRes specs. And it's just kind of going all out. Now, let's talk about the physical camera build of itself. I imagine this camera body being almost very identical to the GH6, but just in the full frame body. All of the full frame cameras would definitely be with an L mount sensor, and it would have front and back tally lights. It would have those two front function buttons. It would have that flippy up and flippy out screen similar to the GH6 and the S1H currently, which is honestly such a nice thing to have. And when you don't have it, you realize how much you miss it. It would continue having that full HDMI, USB-C for internal recording, and then just the standard mic inputs. Nothing crazy, no XLR mic inputs, at least in the regular version. Nextly, I do think that a couple of the newer features that came on the S5 II would be integrated into this camera, including real-time LUT. Now, I do think they are going to make a bigger improvement on the real-time LUT. The first thing that I think that they're going to do with real-time LUT is make the intensity dial of real-time LUT, so you can change the intensity of how much the LUT is being affected on your clips. The second thing that I might potentially be able to do is make it a little bit more usable for video users. Now, what I mean by this specifically is going to be kind of twofold. Either one option, you can record onto two SD cards. One SD card is in the Vlux or the normal profile, and then the second one is using the burned in look and LUT. The second idea that I think could potentially work is having a proxy version with the real-time LUT burned in, and then the second one would be just untouched vlog or whatever the profile you are using on the footage before applying the real-time LUT. I think that could be making it a more unique opportunity to use real-time LUT specifically in the video aspects, because the photo aspects are super nice. The one thing that would be nice is having some type of intensity layer. And the last thing that I think they would add to the physical camera body itself is dual SD card slots / CF Express Type B card slots, similar to the Sony a7S III, where there's 2 card slots where you can either put CF Express Type B cards or you can put an SD card depending on whatever recording formats that you want. Now for the price for this camera specifically, my guess it's probably going to be in that $3,500 to that $4,000 range, just depending on the internals that are required to make a camera like this from LUMIX. And before I move on to the X version of this body, which is a little bit more of a dream prediction, I do want to talk about a couple potential wants that I would love to see inside this camera. The first one is going to be global shutter. This would remove all rolling shutter issues and anything like that. Having a global shutter would be absolutely huge in this camera. The second one is potentially internal NDs. Now moving on to the X version of this camera, I think there's 2 routes that LUMIX could potentially be taking. The first route is just the basic blackout camera system with raw output and just a bunch of different other unique features like that, similar to the S5 II and S5 IIX. The second route, which I'm a little bit more hopeful for, is have more of a cinema boxier style camera, still with that flip up screen, similar specs, but it's just no viewfinder. It's sort of similar to the FX3 in the X version of the S1H2X or the S2HX or whatever that camera name would be. Lastly, definitely hopefully internal NDs, at least in this version, because this would be the more professional filmmaking camera, while the other one is more of a content creator camera. Now my next big prediction that I can also see LUMIX coming out with is the predecessor of the S1 camera. Now this would either be the S1 II, the S1X, or the S1S, depending how they decide to make this camera. Now, I don't think there would be 2 versions of this camera. I think this would just be the more higher end professional, more video features, but more of a photo hybrid video camera. I don't think this would be the more dedicated filmmaking camera like the S1H Mark II or the S2H, however you want to name that. This would have the exact same specs as the other camera that I just mentioned. So it would still have those 2 front function buttons. It would have that full HDMI, USB-C, mic inputs. But again, this is a more photo-centric camera that I think they would release. I do hope still that there's more control on real-time LUT. Again, probably changing the intensity some way, somehow. And this would probably be in the same price category as I said before, which is $3,500 to $4,000 depending on this. But this would be the more photo-centric camera. Now, with that all said, I definitely would love to see the S1H Mark II or S2H being the next camera that's getting released, but I think that's more of a biased perspective because I love that flip-up screen. I love bulkier cameras. I love more filmmaking centric and filmmaking focused cameras. The front record button, tally lights, everything like that, that makes it feel more of a professional filmmaking camera and less of a hybrid camera, because I'm not a photographer at the end of the day. If I want to shoot cameras and I have an S1H Mark II all rigged out in the future, that would be my filmmaking camera, and I would use the S5 II or 2X just to take photos if that camera isn't rigged up. So I would really hope for the S2H to be coming out first, but I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below on what you think is going to be the next full frame camera from LUMIX. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video right here. If you want to see my thoughts after 5 months of owning the S5 IIX, you can check out that video right here. And then YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Until next week, guys, peace.